I'm not sure how I feel about this dude in the corner here. He's there, he's watching all the time, he's pretending to help us with our memory concerns, he's letting us know that we've got sufficient memory, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure I trust him. There's something about those eyes. Hello and welcome back to my review of QNAP QTS 5.0, the full release version and possibly one of the longest videos I've ever made here on the channel. As it stands, I'm looking at all my notes here and all my testing I've done before, but you there listening to this right now can look at the bottom of the screen and see just how long this video is going to be. Now, this is my review of QNAP's own QTS 5.0 software and services platform. It's what's included with every QNAP NAS. It's the latest version, 5.0, and depending on the model you have and the power of the unit you have, your experience may differ slightly, but today's video is designed to, where possible, target most users of QNAP NAS systems, both new and old. Throughout this video, it's worth mentioning that there's going to be lots of different things I'm going to be looking at. I'm going to be looking at security, control, storage, backups, multimedia, VM, surveillance, design, the works of QTS 5.0, and it's going to be a long video. But before we go any further, it's worth highlighting a bunch of disclaimers. You can fast forward this. This is probably going to take me a couple of minutes, but it's important that you understand that how this review is going to be conducted, and more importantly, what is not going to be included in this review, because as big as this video is, it still can't be long enough to cover all of the features and functionality of any NAS software, not QNAP, not any platform. So first and foremost, the target of this video is for people that are either completely new to the QNAP NAS platform or have a very light understanding. A number of you that have been using the platform for a few years are almost certainly going to be saying that I overlook certain things, and where possible I will highlight everything I can, but I've got to keep it with a nice fine line between new and old QNAP followers who maybe don't understand the platform as much as they might like to. Secondly, I'm not really going to be focusing on anything more than the desktop platform. So for example, I'm not going to be looking at here the QFile Pro software you just saw, which finds NAS software on the background. I am later on going to be using the surveillance client application, QVR Pro client, but only really to show off the surveillance features. I'm not going to be looking at any mobile apps, any DLNA apps, no apps for Android iOS. I'm not going to be looking at desktop client apps. All of those are available. There's loads out there. I'm only going to be looking and access through your web browser, and in this case today I am using Google Chrome. Next up, this video is being conducted on a TVS 872 XT. Now, X. Now again, this is quite a highfalutin NAS, but do bear in mind that not only am I only using the QTS version rather than QUTS ZFS version, but on top of that, I'm only using 8 gig of memory. And the main reason I've chosen this NAS over the 653D or other QNAP NASs is because I'm going to be showing a lot of features simultaneously. So it's worth highlighting that although I'm going to show you a lot of stuff today, you're going to need a powerful NAS to run all of these services simultaneously. You probably get away with most of them, more than half of them at once, but bear in mind that in order to show you all of them together, I've had to go for a more powerful NAS. In this case, a 4-core i3 processor NAS. Next up, this is not the beta. This is a full release. This is not the beta version. This is the one that's got been signed off by QNAP for release. So now I think it's fair for us to review it. I didn't really want to review the beta because I thought that was a bit unfair. Also, I'm not going to be touching on some of the more enterprise level services. So if you come to this video for QUFP, some of the WireGuard VPN stuff, or maybe some of the fiber channel stuff, I am going to be covering those in a future video, but just not this one because they go way too far into the distance enterprise-wise to include in this review. I'll touch on them lightly, but I'm not really going to go into them in any depth. Same thing goes for AI facial recognition tools that can take advantage of Google's AI module, the TPU, that Coral M2. I've got an TPU Coral here. We do have a video on that, but we're not really going to include that. We're going to touch on surveillance, but not that. And finally, during bits of this video, I will be comparing against QTS 4.5.4. The previous version of QNAP is going to be running on a TS653D. So again, I will be looking at that as a way of comparison, such as in design or how some apps are handled. So when we do compare to the old version, and we'll be doing a complete comparison soon, but that will be running on this 6-bay that uses an Intel Celeron processor. So do bear that in mind. And finally, I will be doing a video for QUTS Hero, the ZFS version, very, very soon. So I think that's all of the disclaimers out of the way, and there is a link to the review, which will hopefully be live in the description. But for now, let's have a good look at QTS 5.0. Now, for those of you that followed the preview earlier on, you'll know that design is one of the areas that I'm not overly won over by QTS 5. On the whole, I've got to say, early doors in this review, I am pleased with QTS 5.0. I think if there's one big takeaway I think a lot of people should take in a QTS 5.0 upgrade, it's about control. They've really, if anything, they've doubled down on control and notifications. And for some people, that may be a little bit intimidating. I think if we even take even a light look at some of the notification board stuff, some of it's the same as it was before, but some of the newer ones which use a notification board here on the side of the screen, if we zoom in, you can get a lot more information about how to set things up. And it isn't just that you can have them. There's always been two-step verification and, the malware removal and stuff like that. But now there's a lot more breadcrumbs to set those things up. And I think a lot of people that have had kind of security hiccups with QNAP in the past, some, not all of course, but some have been caused by people just not knowing how to configure certain security settings and being overly reliant on defaults. And I think QTS 5.0 has done a lot of stuff there to remedy a lot of the hand-holding stuff. But one of the things since the beta that hasn't changed, which I'm going to go in with an early negative here, I'm not overly keen on the size of these buttons. I've mentioned it before. Right now, I'm zoomed in at 80%. I use 80% and 70% on most tabs that I use. And if we flick over to QTS 4.5.4, right now it's running here at 100%. So this is 100% here. If we've got the tab on the top, we've got the menu, we've got the apps. Obviously, if you have more apps, it goes 2 rows deep. But if you flick over to QTS 5 and you go to 100% zoom there, those icons are just too big. And they have improved them a little, I've got to say, since we previewed the beta. But look at the size of this menu here. Well, this is when I've got all of these apps installed. Now, of course, I have gone really to town with a number of apps installed here, but I've gone particularly deep here on all of those apps. And I just think this 100% zoom, a lot of people are going to be using this zoom level to read this text, but they're not going to want these icons this big. So I do hope that, again, later on in system firmware updates, that gets remedied, because you've got to have this at 80% to make this visible. And I still don't quite like how many apps are here, and it's not even scrollable there. So again, that's one of an early negatives there, but there's not too many criticisms I'm going to have during the course of this video. I've been using QTS 5.0 in beta and now in full release for a couple of weeks. So again, what hiccups I have, I will touch on throughout this video. But in terms of design, the icons there being too big is something I think that still needs to be revisited. But on the whole, I quite like that they've lightened. You do feel the response times are a lot quicker. A lot of that is due to that upgrade in background kernel. You can definitely see that there. And of course, you've still got the ability to change the background stuff there. You can change wallpaper and all that kind of stuff. But I will say, when you do change the login screen there, that the changes aren't that different compared to what you see in QTS 4.5.4. And indeed, there's still this conflict, I feel, between the design. So, for example, the background there looks very swish, very sharp. But the minute you go into these panel options, the text is quite small. And I'm fine reading that at 80%. But I can totally see a lot of people having to either zoom manually with a touchpad or start zooming in. And of course, once you get to 100%, where this text is still not even the same size as the top text there, the design still could do with a little bit of a revisit there, because I think there's a lot of conflict there on that zoom. But let's keep that at 90 to keep things fair for everyone. The design itself is still very, very clear. I think it's as user-friendly as QTS 5.4 before it. I would say that it's still not as user-friendly as probably one of their biggest competitors, Synology's DSM and DSM-7. DSM-7 has gone for much more of a less is more. They've gone very Apple-centric, whereas QNAP have definitely doubled down on the Android and the window aesthetic. So the Android with the icons there, and the kind of swish, the response time, the way things move and drag and stuff like that. And of course, Windows menus and even the control panel feels a lot more Windows than it does Mac. Now, if we carry on moving forward, we can look into some of the background stuff there. The design, once you go into any application, not a lot of the applications have changed in terms of their overall aesthetic compared with QTS 4.5. So if we bring that up on screen, let's bring these side by side for a moment. Let's snap them side by side. And again, this will make things a little bit tighter there for there on screen. We can see that if we go into the App Center for both of these, the App Center is going to look pretty similar. And you're going to get that throughout this video. These things are going to be very similar once you move away from the desktop there. They've changed a lot of the background services and the layout of certain options, but still nonetheless, the individual design on these apps hasn't really been changed that much. Now, moving slightly away from design, let's talk about probably one of the key areas for anyone looking at network attached storage, and that is security. Now, for those that aren't aware, QNAP has the security counselor, and it also has the kind of guidance area as well. So if we move in and have a look through some of those options on screen, we can take a look at some of the other security options that are readily available. And of course, where is it? We've got the security counselor, and then we've got the notification center, which again is here. Again, a lot of information there to take in. I've got to deduct another point there for design. It was not easy to immediately find it. Yes, it's alphabetical, but there's still a lot of stuff there on screen to have to go through all the time. So coming out there, if we move out, we can see the notification center there. We can, of course, change the direction of notification, who's getting them, how you want them to be delivered, of course, as well, and the nature of those notifications, and of course, the errors that are notified all the way through the system's use. You can see here at one point, I had disconnected network connectivity, and the system kicked off a multitude of alerts during that period. Now, the same goes for that. We have got all of the security settings already set up here. I've gone for a basic security policy, but again, you can adapt these quite quickly, and you can even create those customized ones that would change all the settings of the NAS quite tightly there. And again, we've got the security check there that we can run a fresh check to see if there's any issues. We've got the antivirus check built in there, where I've got scans happening on a regular rotation. Then we've got the malware checks as well. We can run a malware scan, and of course run updates on the firewall that we're running, where it's going to be blocking or allowing certain protocols and certain apps both inside and outside the NAS to conduct their services. Now, the reason I bring all this up, all of these things existed in a slightly less tweaked form in QTS 4.5.4, but they weren't as tied together as neatly. These apps existed, but definitely some of the pathways between these applications have been improved quite significantly in how they're addressed and directed to, not only from the desktop there or from within other security apps, but from within that notice board there, as it guides you through setting up the device in a less obtrusive way. Like when you set up the previous generations of NAS, there's about 10 different pop-ups alerting you to security settings in the middle of the screen, and it's quite irritating. Whereas now, having it on the notification panel when you log in is a little bit more discreet. It does draw the eye. It's a lovely design switch, and I do quite like that. Now, moving from security into users, of course, in the control panel, it's worth highlighting that if we go into, for example, the users panel, nothing's really changed here. We can adapt security settings and add users very quickly and adding multiple users, of course. We create a batch of them really, really quickly, and we can change all of their permissions, their credentials, the groups that we're in really, really quickly. It's all nice and straightforward to create groups of family members, business colleagues, that sort of thing. And all of the options are pretty much where they were before. They've added a few tiny ones that are very area specific. So for example, with regard to some of the security settings, or when you're using QNAP's My Cloud service, they've added some extra stuff in the background there as well. And again, it's all fairly straightforward and easy to add on there. And indeed, if we look at the firmware settings, we can see which version of the firmware we're running. There we go, right there. So coming out of it, we can carry on looking a little bit more at storage. Storage is going to be a big area for a lot of people because, let's face it, QNAP, although when it comes to kind of the customization and the flexibility and bespoke build quality of QNAP NAS being quite high, it has to be said that the storage manager, although you want all the flexibility and the customization, you just want to be able to look at it and know the information at hand. Now, in the case of this device here, we've got all the disks listed there inside. We're running with 4 disks inside there. We've also got a couple of SSDs that are being utilized in our area of cache acceleration. QTS 5 has improved cache acceleration there, all built in. We're going for a read-write cache, nice and easy. And we can get some real-time information from that pretty quickly. On top of that, we've created the area of storage, the volume. We've created, obviously, the storage pool. But on top of that, you can see there that the cache has been added to that system quite easily. We can get real-time drive information, which is always lovely to see. And lots of information about those individual RAID groups as well. All of this is stuff that we're pretty familiar with, it has to be said. Now, moving down, we can talk a little bit about snapshots. For those that aren't aware, we have got snapshots already loaded into this system, nice and easy. You can even reclaim space as well, some nice flexibility in snapshot storage utilization. And in some cases, you can reverse some of your earlier decisions in the storage. So if you want to add storage, snapshots later that you didn't apply early doors. And again, that's always been a nice feature of QNAP. They were one of the first to enable snapshots in this quite user-friendly manner, and it's quite easy and quite, if you know what you're doing with storage, all the options are where you'd like them to be, but it doesn't err too heavily into the complex here, which I quite like. Now, going to the bottom here, you can see these 3 extra options that we will talk again about later on, but again, we've got these tools here that allow us to do multiple things with our storage. So for example, if we come out, we can open up the iSCSI manager. It allows us to create those targets and those LUNs, so we can create localized appearing storage remotely. And as you can see here, I've already created one. It's really, really straightforward to create. It does hold your hand a lot, and although I'm not going to talk about the fiber channel stuff in this video, it's just as straightforward to create a new target. If we zoom back out, again, we can create our targets very easily. It does hold your hand all the way through. It's quite straightforward, and you can assign multiple LUNs to that target if you enjoy. And of course, you can do the file-based or the block-based for space reclamation if you choose. On top of that, hybrid mount is where we bolt on either remote NAS storage, something I've done, or cloud services. So in my case, I've attached a cloud service here, utilizing the old throwaway Google Mail account we use for videos. Alternatively, I've also attached the other NAS, that's 653D, as available storage. And these, therefore, if we go into the storage, the file manager even, these now have the appearance of localized storage. So we've got the Google Drive there bolted on, which we can then use with the appearance if we select whatever folders we want on that drive. So we've selected a few folders, and all of these will appear there. Whereas if we go into the other options here, we can go into let's come out of it there because it's listed all of those folders. We can talk to the other NAS and have a look at the folder structure that we decided to view there. So only one folder I've selected for music. And then of course we've got a USB drive. It's all now visible here, nice and easily via the File Station application. And again, we can play with how these are listed quite easily, and all the options are there. It's also worth touching on that Microsoft Word and Google Docs can be utilized to open up Word documents So if we go into my Google Drive, we can have a look there. Maybe I've got some scripts for some other videos there. Perhaps we can find one in there. Go into Docs, find one for us there, and open one up just to give you guys an idea of what I mean. So we've got an old unboxing script there, so particularly old, and then we can say how we want to open it, whether we want to use a Chrome extension. And those Chrome extensions you can download and install onto the NAS, options for Google Docs, for Microsoft Word, and more. All of those are built in. You can even use the ones that are built into your own individual web browser if you choose. And as you can see, they're all listed quite easily, and it does let you know which tools are going to be utilized all the way through. And you can even just use the web browsers, the ones that you've already got pre-installed. Now, file management extends to more than just FileStation, of course. You can utilize lots of files within dedicated applications. So if you want, for example, to take advantage of Multimedia, there is, of course, Music Station, there is Photo Station. Let's open them all up one by one. We have got Video Station. Let's bring that up there. And of course, you have got QMAGI, which is the AI-powered photo recognition tool. Now that opens up in its own tab, but if we have a look, we can see we've got some movies added there. We've got the metadata scraped, so we can have a look. For example, there's the Matrix. We've got the information there. It's not quite as visually appealing, I would argue, as Synology's Video Station application, their DS Video app, and more. I think the design could be a little snazzy there, but the playback is still pretty good. I'm just going to mute things here. So, for example, if we double-click that movie, we can view it in the web browser. It'll also, of course, be visible via the web browser. I am using OBS down here, so that may affect how the outcome of that is. By the way, anyone else totally stoked for the Matrix movie this Christmas? Just putting it out there. Anyway. Hopefully this video isn't going to be rewatched in 2022 and that movie was a flop and I sound like a crazy fool. But Photo Station and Music Station are other applications that can be utilized. I've not set up Music Station in its entirety for a reason. I'll show you in just a moment. But this is where you can play your music. You can stream to individual tools as well. So if you've got an HDMI out or digital audio via HDMI audio connected to the NAS directly, you can use that. Or streaming devices in your local area network, Sonos sound systems, Bose network sound systems, they'll all appear. They're all there and available. Photo Station, of course, kind of the more pro photo application. We look at the gallery there. This allows us to get more metadata about the photos that are taken. And of course, with all of that metadata, you also get with it a lot of the ability to filter and categorize and create bespoke albums. This is from back in Berlin last, I believe, 2 years ago. And again, lots of information there. We've got some of the geolocational data as well, all built in. Information about the cameras and the lens as well. And again, you can do lots of stuff. You can use facial recognition from QMAGI that I'm going to talk about in a moment, as well as create a customized slideshow, share these files quite easily on a multitude of services, or just use a copy link as well, with lots of abilities of how you want it shared. Do you want a password? How long you want it to be valid for, that sort of thing. All of those options are built in, but of course it isn't just looking at it in the gallery mode. You can do the management mode that's got a timeline. It lacks the map feature that I quite like. I don't know why the map feature's been removed, but still nonetheless it is still good to be able to scroll your photos and again sort through them and create shared folders that you as a professional photographer that maybe are doing wedding photo shoots or just general shoots can then share with your customers and then control the sharing of those. So for example, you can create a batch of photos that you want to share there, and then from the ones I've just selected you can then choose what you want to do with those. So you can choose, do I want to share those files? Do I want to enter them into their own album? Do I want to download them? Do I want to play those as a slideshow? There's lots of things we can do within this app. But of course, the premium photo app is always going to be QMAGI. Now, QMAGI's got that gallery mode. As mentioned, there's all of the photos on the NAS. But what we really want to do, if we go to view mode there, we can sort of change the grid. We can kind of put it into a size-based mode there. We can look at the one by one if we choose, or we can do a timeline mode as well, depending on however it is that we want to look at it. But the real cool mode is, of course, the albums using AI-powered photo recognition. we can go ahead and get faces recognized there. So for example, we can go for this photo of me here, and then from there we can go ahead and name this person, which in my case, if we go back, we can name them there, give it my name. Boom, I'm in the database. And then if there's me there, what I can do is select this, select me because I've been added to the database, and boom, it's now pulling all these pictures of me where I look slightly different, sunglasses, hats, beards, that sort of thing. And you can do that with all those people. But the cool thing is these tags are then carried over to that PhotoStation application there. So again, having those tags split across the two things is always going to be useful there to be able to synchronize the photo recognition tools at the same time as the AI recognition here. But those tags that you apply there, it's not the end of the road, because once you go into the albums mode, you can go into things mode. And this is where the AI recognition can notice things in photos. So for example, this has got 84 photos of animals. And there you go, they've all been tagged. Now, unfortunately, you can't tag individual animals. That I think is a little bit outside the scope. But again, you can apply these tags if you choose to these, which can then be picked up here on PhotoStation in a number of ways. And again, the breakdown of that AI recognition is impressive because it's not only that it recognizes things typically, it actually goes into a little bit more detail, such as individual foodstuffs, or noticing different kinds such as waffle there, or going for different cuisines when it's recognized Japanese cuisine there. Now, it's not always perfect because sometimes it is working with an AI framework. That is a cat where half of it's going for a box at Christmas. It's listed as a reptile. It definitely isn't. Same with rainbow. So the AI recognition isn't perfect, but QNAP, much like most AI supported services, are using Google's own AI algorithm and supplied AI services. So you're not going to get much better than this on Google either. These are going to be recognized that same way. So coming out of QMaggie there and all of those services in photo recognition, let's talk a little bit about backups and synchronization, because a lot of you are going to be concerned about where your data lives and the security of your data. As already mentioned when we went into the storage manager, that when it comes to your data in a RAID configuration, there's lots of different RAID configs you can create on this, and they're very easy to make. Unfortunately, I've already set up the RAID on this box, but from within that storage area, we can then, if we choose, manage this system area in terms of the storage pool with scrubbing and removing or adding drives if we choose, running maintenance checks, or even if we go into individual drives, running security and not security, the health checks on drives. So for example, we can check out the disk health on a number of drives, and of course there's iWolf Health Management built in as well. So if you do have the rescue recovery service built into the Seagate drive, it will appear there. And again, you just have to register that early doors on the system that you have it, and then after that, the system tracks that for you. Again, lots of different features built in, both from QNAP themselves in Smart Test and more. But of course, there is the Health Analyzer tool as well. And I'm going to have a whole dedicated video on this tool where I was using some of the beta software. We're not really going to touch on it too much in this video. If we look at Drive Analyzer, let's find it there. Where's DA? I'm not sure if it's going to be listed. I believe it may still be in beta, but the Drive Analyzer tool is definitely a kind of an extra layer of drive health security check moving forward. But I believe right now the latest beta has ended on that. As you may have seen once we looked at some of the alerts earlier that highlighted my license had expired. But DA Analyzer is something that QNAP themselves do talk about a lot, and it is something that I will be covering very, very soon. But outside of RAID, what you really want to know about, of course, is synchronization and backups. And of course, one of the earliest and most useful tools from QNAP on this is Hybrid Backup Sync 3. Now, Hybrid Backup Sync 3 allows you to create quite a detailed backup routine of, and synchronization, I might add, of all of your data on the NAS and on other services. I will, of course, be talking about QSync as well, because QSync is a tool that you will install on your desktop and mobile devices, which allows you to synchronize the data in individual folders on your NAS. So in my case, I can open up QSync here. Where's QSync? Open it up. And again, I said I wouldn't talk too much about desktop tools, but I'll get back to HBS 3 in a second. But it's worth talking about QSync first, because this is the tool that you're going to be utilizing if on your NAS, for example, you want to make sure you have a folder that is constantly synchronized with your NAS. So in my case, I've got two NASes that are synchronized. So this is on my Windows machine here, and this allows me to synchronize folders on my NAS locally with my computer. And if any changes happen in these folders, these will be reflected on the NAS and vice versa. And it allows me to interact with the NAS remotely and via the internet if I set it up with my QNAP cloud, and go through all files and folders on my NAS, but using my localized tools. You can also use, of course, iSCSI, and of course you can use mapped network drives. All of those options are available. But again, having this tool for both your mobile devices and your desktop devices for Mac, Linux, and of course Windows allows you to synchronize important areas. So for example, this synchronization here is a lot of my temp data on this laptop when I do my editing. So this means if my laptop breaks, in the background I have a synchronized folder that's using non-linear edited copies in the background, synchronized with my NAS at all times. So these are tiny files that are incredibly important, which are being backed up to the NAS, and then I only keep 147 gig space on the PC backed up to the NAS for my editing, which then gets refreshed and recycled over time. And then the NAS, of course, backs up those folders on the NAS to other locations on HBS that I'm going to show you in a moment. QSync is a very overlooked tool in my opinion, and I have done dedicated videos on this, which allow you to add multiple devices all the time to either back up their contents or select contents or synchronize with the NAS certain folders, so vice versa folders can be accessed. Now, the difference between that and HBS 3 is Hybrid Backup Sync 3 allows you to add a huge number of supported services, from NAS to NAS backups, NAS to cloud backups, NAS to USB backups, a real-time remote replication, Apple Time Machine, so many different backup methods. And all of these backup methods have scheduled options, they have version control, they have time managed backups, file size control. I've got 3 backup operations here that are running daily here, that are running one to another NAS, one to the cloud, and one to USB drive. All of them set up exceedingly quickly indeed. Just to give you some idea, here's how quickly you can set up these tools, the backup structures. If we create a new backup job, so we open up the tool, and again, they do have integrity checks, I forgot to mention on that. So first thing we want to do is select a folder on our NAS that we want to back up. So in my case, why don't I choose to back up my container data? So there we'll go. And again, if you're going to map an external volume that's been mapped to your drive, you can do that if you choose. So again, an external volume we can go for, and that's the USB drive. I'm not going to be doing that. If we go for just the container data, then select next, and from here we can say where we want to send the backup. So for example, do we want to send it to this same NAS or maybe a USB port? Do we want to send it to another NAS? Do we want to use all of these cloud services, which we can then just select, and then it will open up, ask us to log into that cloud service provider remotely, and then from there you can set up that backup. But in my case, let's go for that local USB NAS just to show you. From here, it's now going to ask us to select the destination on the local NAS. So in my case, I would use the USB. I would then choose a new backup. I would select a new folder perhaps and call it backup 2. Add the folder on the new volume, add the folder, and boom, we've got new backup folder 2. Select OK, and there we go. We've got our location we're backing up from and where to. We've got that fine. We can name the job. We can select individual files and folders. Select next. From here, we can say, do we want to schedule it? Do we want to do it as a one-off? We can say, do we want the versioning control enabled? We can say, do we want regular integrity checks of that data? It's all built up in there. Do we want to take advantage of deduplication, the ability to, if you've got backups from multiple locations all going into the same area, that it only keeps one copy of the file but keeps track of everyone who's got a copy of it, such as operating system files. You can enable that here. Backup policies, encryption. You can change so many things about what to do if a job fails or how big you want certain files to be. You can even say how you want it to adapt to the network during network traffic or if there are network interference. Finally, you can say confirm everything you've done so far and click create to create that job. And again, if we go all the way back and cancel this job, what we can do instead is go ahead and show you how to do a cloud backup. So again, we can do a cloud backup job like I've created there with Google. So again, we'll go for the container folder, select next, and we'll select a backup option. So in my case, I'm going to go with Google Drive. It will say, do you want to use the one that you've already added? Do you know what? Because I want to show you guys fresh, you can go ahead and select, for example, OneDrive. A OneDrive pop-up will appear. It will ask you to sign into your OneDrive account. And once you've done that, all the other steps that you've just seen are all the same. Again, if you want to do a synchronization job, which is two folders that are the same and synchronize on two NASes, which is what I've done here, it's exactly the same principle. So you can do a two-way sync, so the data remains the same, a one-way sync, so the data is moved, or an active sync job, which is constant. So for example, a two-way sync job, you would say, where do you want destination? It's going to be on a remote NAS. But again, you can synchronize with those blob cloud storages. Again, HBS 3 is still, for my money, one of the best designed in terms of aesthetic and usability backup tools on the market. I know in recent months it's been under fire for a lot of security problems linked to people not updating their software, and I would dare I say QNAP dropping the ball a few times as well. But I'm still behind it as a tool, and I think it's one of the best ones out there for synchronization. There are VM related tools, and we'll move on to the subject of VMs now, I think. In terms of virtualization, we've got several kind of virtual instant tools available. One of them I've already kind of talked about, which was Container Station. We'll talk about there. We have got a virtualization station as well. And then finally, you've got Ubuntu Linux Station as well. Ubuntu Linux Station, I'll touch on briefly, allows you within 2 clicks to install a Linux VM that you can access remotely very, very easily on your NAS. Bear in mind that the Ubuntu Linux Station is a standalone VM, and it can, because it runs as a container, it will use up a lot of resources inside, but it's still incredibly useful. It's completely free, and if you want to experiment with Linux, it's a great way to start. Coming out of Linux Station, we've then got Container Station. Now, Container Station, for those who aren't aware, if going back to Virtualization Station, a VM is a virtual equivalent of a computer that allows you to run it to be accessed remotely via the network or the internet. Container Station is kind of a virtual app without the OS. It allows you to run kind of sandbox applications without the dependency of an operating system or a hypervisor. Container Station, you've got the App Center here, so you can choose to head there and install lots of apps that are being made available in the whole App Center. So if we go to Create, you can find absolutely loads of applications ready and available to install, and there are thousands as well, or just install your own manual ones. Again, you can import ones from the store, export existing ones that you've all created, and there's lots of configuration. If you love containers, it's a great tool. I've already running Odo there as a container, and again, we can go into the command line if we choose and do what we want to do with it to play with it. There's lots of configuration options ready and available, but I know most people are concerned with virtualization of the kind of standard hypervisor client variety. I've got 3 Windows 11 VMs. I've already done a dedicated video on this very NAS not a short while ago showing Windows 11 VMs running on here. Virtualization Station has got a huge number of configuration tools. So if we go into one of these VMs, I've not turned it on yet. Actually, if we turn on one of these VMs down here, and we will deactivate it later in the video, just because otherwise it will take up a lot of resources. Let's run that VM there underneath. And while we do that, I'm just going to show you the configuration options on this other VM here. So again, you can configure a lot of things, everything from network tools there in the background, hard drive, adding more storage, even USB devices that you want to appear within the VM and the Windows VM and more, PCIe tools, graphics cards and more. You can also change a lot of the preset configurations really easily in the VM. There's a lot of playground stuff here for you to play with and a lot of stuff that you can add manually to the VM to make your virtual machine have a lot of the feeling of a localized configuration. Let's open that up in a separate tab. You've also got the option to download certain VMs. We've got blocking happening there in the background. Unfortunately, this is something that's going to happen due to my recording environment here. So unfortunately, I'm not able to show you the VM Marketplace, but take my word for it. There is a huge list of VM tools there. And again, you can even go ahead and download a Windows VM, but again, my network blocking right now is going to prevent that for the course of this video. But you can download directly different Windows 7, 8, 9, and 10, and I'm sure they'll add 11 soon to download. There you go, straight away they have actually already added an image for Windows 11 there to download and try out. But again, I think my network busyness is going to make showing off some of these features a little trickier, but I have done a full dedicated video there on Windows 11 using QTS 5 on Virtualization Station 3 already on the channel. I think that came out a couple of weeks ago, in fact. Now, if you are a VM user, you are going to be thinking about your data in a number of ways, and this kind of links in a little bit to the conversation regarding virtual machines, tools such as the Hyper Protector, which allows you to back up the data from those VMs and some cloud-related ones, such as taking advantage of VMware and Hyper-V, and have them all backed up to the NAS, some of which can be portaled over to the Virtualization Station application. So if I log into the app here, utilizing my NAS credentials, it'll allow you to go through some of the options to either back up some of those services in Hyper-V and VMware, some of which can then be imported and exported relative to which one you want to do over to Virtualization Station. Also, on top of that, while you've got the VM tools there, you've of course got BoxSafe. BoxSafe, which is utilized in conjunction with Google's G Suite, or taking advantage of Office 365, you can log in. Let's go for it there. Sorry, slightly far away from my keyboard. And this will allow you to attach your domain if you're utilizing Workspace or 365, and from there keep a localized backup of all of your email accounts, the accounts you've created, a lot of the docs, and have a synchronized resource between your remote cloud services and all of those tools that you use with the NAS. And in the event, if you have a drop down in internet connectivity, you can connect all of your services to the NAS, which will then synchronize with the cloud data in the background later, ultimately ensuring that in the event of internet disconnection, your localized business users, your staff, your clients and more have got access to all of this data on your business class platform, that SaaS, software as a service platform, without internet connectivity, and synchronized there later on and utilized and accessible in a native way, which is always useful. Now, we've talked a lot about these services. I did actually overlook, when I was talking about multimedia earlier on, the HDMI output. If you have a NAS that takes advantage of an HDMI out, then of course you can portal into your NAS and deal with some applications there. Now, of course, we're recording this on the web browser, but it's worth highlighting that you can log in to the HDMI out on your NAS via the web browser, and from there it will allow you to not only see what's going on the HDMI out, we had to disable Linux Station to do it, hence the cut in the video, but it allows you to install lots more applications, both in first and third party, and access your NAS locally with a keyboard, video, and mouse or KVM setup with applications available for communication such as Skype, multimedia apps such as HD Player, Music Station, Photo Station and Video Station, Spotify to access your music via the NAS and record some of them in places, and of course access your surveillance tools as well with the QVR program. This is how it looks. We've portaled in via the localized access point there via the web browser, but of course you can access this via the HDMI out, and of course you can set default applications, install other applications, and of course there are the third-party applications available from places like QNAP Club to install multimedia apps, DTV services and more. Coming out of all of those, we can carry on and talk about surveillance. Surveillance, a big part of the Synology the QNAP platform there. And of course, if we go into it, we can have a little look at QVR Pro, which again we can log into via the web browser. On top of that, there are other added services as well, not all of which I have installed, but are worth touching on. Again, lots of applications we're playing with this. If we go into the surveillance tab, we can see the options available. We've got QUSB Cam, which we can actually open up, which allows you to attach a USB camera to your NAS, and from there, that USB camera can then be used for live access local to the NAS. We've even attached a camera here, which we can, if we choose, activate live mode, and if I move over to the camera, you can attach USB cameras to the NAS if you choose, but of course the real beauty is when you're going to be utilizing remote cameras. Now, remote cameras are known as IP cameras. You can attach cameras easily and, you know, change the rules and stuff like that on the NAS, but you can't access the cameras via the web browser. It's one of the things I've been less keen on when it comes to surveillance on a QNAP. I think the 8 camera licenses you get with QVR Pro is still awesome, and there are loads of other added services as well for QVR Go, QVR Guard, QVR Smart Search to browse through things quickly, QVR Center where you can kind of create a multi-platform synchronized surveillance tool, and of course you've got AI supported services in QVR Face Tiger, Face Link, Face Insight, and there are others coming too, and indeed QVR Door for IO related hardware that utilizes surveillance that can all be integrated in. Again, I've got dedicated videos on QVR Face and one coming up soon that takes advantage of that MTU that we mentioned earlier, that Coral Google AI supported thing to really lower resource consumption there. But if we come out, in order to see the cameras in all their glory, you have to go into QVR's client application. Now again, I said I wouldn't go on it into too much detail, but as we log into QVR Pro here, this is the user interface for that app that we install on the Windows platform. And again, some of my cameras right now I am utilizing on other NASs. So even though they're on the network, we're not able to access them because they're being used by another NAS at this time. But what we can do is drag some of these, a couple of other cameras in, and we can see there the USB camera from earlier. I'll wave at it there. And then above me, I've got another camera there at the top, and again, lots of stuff we can do with this. We can create a picture-in-picture to zoom in what I'm typing there. We can create another picture-in-picture at my little list of notes, as well as my phone, as some of the other junk that I'm using there during this video and others. And again, all of that laid around there that we can utilize. It's a pan-tilt zoom camera, which unfortunately the pan-tilt zoom camera at number 1 is not accessible at this time. But again, we can set patrol patterns, recording patterns, create e-maps, the whole works. All of it can be accessed here, and again, all of these have got the same features that we can go in and create zoomed areas and indeed snapshots if we choose, which are saved locally, as well as all of the control and more, as well as switching between streams, lowering the picture quality, event notifications, with all of the event handling being done on the side of the app here. So we can create new event rules, new camera settings and more, all from within this window, along with intelligent motion detection, which will allow us to track objects with smarter cameras, and using a lot of those AI services, really bring it all together for a real business class surveillance experience. However, it's worth highlighting that as much as I like QTS, and definitely QTS 5 has improved things, definitely in terms of control, and they have looked at making security settings a little bit more palatable and understandable. One area of QNAP which I've always had slightly mixed feelings about is to do with licensing. For those who aren't aware, QNAP, a lot of its services, you get free licenses early doors. There's that drive analyzer one I touched on earlier. But the applications, a lot of them, and particularly some of the enterprise ones, you either get just a couple of licenses or you get no licenses and you have to download individual licenses at the license center from QNAP. Now, it makes sense in some regards that sometimes you're going to be using things for business class services, and to make sure these services are maintained, they should be paid for. But sometimes they're a little tighter on the licenses than I think they should be. So for example, for QVR Pro for NAS, you get 8 camera licenses included for free. But then they cost quite a lot per camera license. And others, for example, QVR Elite, which is the same as QVR Pro, but it utilizes less system resources and runs on less NAS systems as they phase out Surveillance Station. These only run on subscription services. You can't get a permanent license. They only last for a certain period of time. Same goes to some of the other services like QSirch, where you have to get a license, although things are changing with some QSirch and QFile licenses being handed out for some users as incentives. And Hybrid Mount, you have 2 licenses by default, but again, you can add more, but they're subscription based, and you're already, chances are, using a subscription service on those cloud services to start with. And some of these, such as the AI supported services, you either get no licenses at all or beta licenses. So again, although this is more about QNAP's stance on licenses more than the applications themselves, I would still like to see the things change a little bit more on that moving forward. And again, I am using OBS, this is a reminder, so there may have been the odd conflict there during some of those switches. Let's come out of the surveillance platform. Let's cancel it out there. Still want to close it? Yes, we do. And I think for now, we can kind of wrap things up on our review and how things compare on QTS 5.0 and how they compare against QTS 4.5.4. Because there's a lot to talk about here, and we've covered quite a lot of things in today's video. Things that I love, I definitely like the new notice board. It does keep things nice and straightforward. It definitely makes, I think, the security setup and knowing what you're doing a lot easier, definitely more than the pop-ups that appear when you start up your QNAP NAS on QTS 4.5.4 when we look at it there. Things like when you go into it here, I think a lot of the notifications here, they're a lot more like kind of hidden, they're not really brought to your attention, and indeed, I think a lot of the resource handling of QTS 5.0 is a lot sharper. Things definitely feel a lot more responsive. I haven't touched on some areas, as I mentioned in my disclaimer at the beginning, the support of, say, WireGuard and more, VPN services, and VPN abilities as well to keep things particularly safe, with the NAS acting as a kind of conduit for the rest of the devices in your home environment. I do like a lot more of these services being added in QVPN. But of course, a lot of these, once again, require additional payments from individual VPN providers. I think, obviously, a lot of the key applications in QTS 5.0 have always existed, such as QMaggie, still one of my favourite applications for AI recognition. Hybrid Mount, something that, again, we've got that unclean file system there because I've attached a USB drive that needs a change. I like those notifications. I like how they pop up and alert me in a more subtle and less aggressive way in this new version of QTS. I like that Hybrid Mount can use any cloud service, unlike, say, for example, Synology's Hybrid Share, which only utilizes their own cloud platform, and whereas their C2, QNAP have still kept things very, very open. And again, it's always that fine balance with QNAP, trying to find the difference between customization and control, security and freedom on their platform. Something that I still think to this day they're having difficulty keeping a pin on, but it is an ever-wavering point. Now, We talked about security, of course, and again, you've got things like McAfee built in, again, needs a license. And if you want to use it for business services, you've got QFiling, you've got QSirch, those two applications for staying on top of the files on your system on a business class level, as well as searching intelligently throughout the whole system in a far more familiar fashion to those that utilize standard Google services, where we can look up things within the NAS in a much faster manner and in a much more familiar and customizable fashion, which is always good to see. We will be revisiting those AI supported services, but take my word for it, you do have to pay a pretty penny on other platforms to have this, and the ability to have this without a GPU is still worth talking about, albeit if there is a buffer of licensing in the way. Teamviewer is something we're going to talk about in another video that allows you to bolt on the NAS to your QNAP, bolt on the QNAP NAS to your existing Teamviewer list of services. So if you have a bunch of PCs and client applications and hardware on your Teamviewer list, you can add the QNAP NAS, so you can have that one portal access, which is always cool to see. So we've got a whole dedicated video on Teamviewer there. And aside from, I would argue, some questionable decisions in terms of the design aesthetic, where I think there is definitely still major conflict there in my eyes between, for example, the font sizes and the design of the UI, which feels too gradual rather than them releasing the entire design upgrade as its own software upgrade rather than calling this whole thing QTS 5.0. I think areas of the aesthetic could still be revisited, but I can't fault them on the applications. I can't fault them on how they're presenting security options better than they have previously. Are they perfect? No. Are they where they need to be? No. I do think the security updates, I think, although they are done in a great, more chewable and more friendly and user-friendly fashion, there's still not enough things being done by default. And I think as much as they want to be customizable and they want to be as adaptable and bespoke to all users, I think they do need something a little bit more like when you go into the security counselor and there is just a pull down for basic security settings, where these are a little bit more understandable, so users understand what they're doing a little bit more. All the information's there and all the controls are there, but I think it still might be a little bit harder for those not willing to put in a little bit more time and climb the learning curve. But this has been my review of QTS 5.0. You guys know I don't really like doing scores out of 5 or 10 or percentages. I will say QTS 5 is better than QTS 4.5.4. I think as long as they're prepared to work on the design aesthetic, where the text, like it does in the old version here, feels like it goes, the design aesthetic seemingly, you know, for me, matches a great deal better than it does in the new version, and I will stop ragging on that. If they can just address this, I think QTS 5.0 is the best version of their system software they've done to date. It's the cleanest, it's the most responsive, it just needs to address some of these designs, the actual aesthetic design conflicts. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this exceptionally long video, do let me know in the description, again, in the comments. I apologise to the length, but there was so much to cover today, and I've not even touched on everything. If you've enjoyed the video, click like, click subscribe to learn more. I will be addressing all of those things, from QUTS versions to AI, QUFP, VPN, and fiber channel stuff very, very soon. And again, I have got a full comparison side by side on these two applications coming very, very soon. Stay tuned for that. But I will see you next time.